live from Hollywood, California, and somewhere deep inside the United Kingdom. It's the Andy and Amanda Show,
which just now became a classic.
This is a program you do not want to miss, featuring very special guests and all the news that you might not want to hear, and a program that you might not want to hear. That's why you want to hear it. Of course, it's Coast to Coast with Andy Kimmel and Amanda Love.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Hey, folks, good afternoon, evening, good morning, whatever time it is in the world where you are, because we know we are heard all over the world in like 15 or 16 countries. It is another Andy and Amanda Show with Andy Kimmel here in California and Amanda Love, as the announcer said, we are deep inside the UK.
Yeah.
Somewhere over there. It's Amanda Love. And good day to you, Amanda. How you doing? How's it going? Good evening to you. Good evening.
Yeah, it's the evening. It's been another glorious sunny day and high vibes around the UK. Well, I like to think they're high vibes around the UK. I could be wrong. People prove me wrong, I'm sure. But yeah, everything's good here. Yeah. Trying to get back into the flow now. I was all hyped, ready for this, and it's just like, It's all good, darling, all good. How about you?
Hey, no complaints, No complaints. Things are doing pretty good over here. A lot of news going on. A lot of things that are happening between the Derek Chauvin trial and the murder of George Floyd. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. We're going to talk about Matthew Gaetz, the congressperson who is being investigated for potential traffic violations. Not traffic violations. Traffic violations. Sex trafficking. I knew it was traffic something. Who's being investigated? Jeez. Okay. Yeah, for traffic violations. For sex trafficking, and we'll talk about that a little bit. What's going on with that, and where did that come from, and where did it originate, and so forth. And we'll talk about the stepping up, the beefing up, if you will, of the district attorney's office in Fulton County, Georgia, regarding the potential indictment of former President Donald Trump with election violations, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. But anyway, that's all coming up, and I believe in about a half hour, about 30 minutes, I believe in something. I'm not sure quite what. I do believe. I do. We're going to have Bob Kimmel on the show, who's the former director, and I'm going back from, I think, 68 to 75 in that time period, or maybe longer, in the 70s. We'll find out. He was the director of CBS Radio News. Everything you heard and everything that was organized and assigned on CBS Radio News went through his desk. And we'll talk to him about the news media, of gathering information, about reporting, how it's assigned, how it's derived, what they put on the air, what they don't put on the air, some interesting stories that he's covered. And I know that he was very involved also in covering the space program back then, the Gemini, especially the Apollo program, the venture to the moon. And we'll talk to him all about that, and also his work in a program that he started called Audio TV Features, where he actually fully produced radio news features and eventually television features, which were broadcast via the AP, at that time UPI, satellites to 2,000 radio stations across the country, and were heard along with the AP and UPI news as features on their same network that were paid for by corporations that subscribed to his company that they would produce. So that's kind of interesting what they did regarding public relations and what happened. They were, I think, eventually absorbed by one of the largest public relations firms in the country. But we'll talk about that. And he should be joining us in about 30 minutes, barring a potential conflict. But we'll see. If he doesn't come on the show, which I think he's going to. But we'll see. We'll see. Anyway.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it is a sunny, beautiful day here in California, as it is there. I'm sure it's warming up there, right, in the UK?
Oh, yes, I've got my shorts on.
You do? Anywhere you can send a picture?
You want to see the legs, huh, Andy? Right.
I do.
Unfortunately, they're not as tanned as most people's right now, where I've been a winter baby for so long.
You've been windsurfing? You've been windsurfing for so long?
No.
Isn't the water kind of cold out there this time of year?
Yeah, I do it all from my room. You know, I've got such a powerful imagination. It's great.
Yeah, you don't see my legs. I've been out there windsurfing, you see, and
yeah.
you know.
I throw up a picture on the screen, stand in front of it, you know, pretend I'm there, stand on a board, make it feel like I'm actually doing something. Oh, can you imagine? I've actually seen some funny memes on online where people have taken things like a toilet seat, taken a picture of themselves in front of the toilet seat whilst it's open, with a picture of like the sky behind it, so it looks like they're in an airplane, looking out of an airplane window. I think it's hilarious.
Just kind of, you know, got my mind wandering here. Well, got my mind set adrift, thinking and imaging. Hey, listen. You know, we let's dive into some things we need to talk about. What's going on here? The Derek Chauvin trial, the murder trial, the police officer who was accused of murdering George Floyd about a year ago, is underway. And we've got some clips and some things and some commentary on what's going on in that trial. I think maybe what I should do is start it off with something that directly relates to that, because there are certain things that witnesses did not see, even from the commentators who've been talking about it. One, which is Charles Ramsey. Charles Ramsey, by the way, is the former chief of police in Philadelphia, it's right near my hometown. I tell people I'm from Philly because they wouldn't recognize where I was from, Mars. Anyway, no, they wouldn't recognize where I was from Philly. And he has been commenting as a former police chief, not only in Philadelphia, but also the former chief of police of Washington, D.C., on the training of the police officers and in his perspective and what would normally occur in the situations which led up to the George Floyd killing. And then also we have some of the behind-the-scenes commentary, which most people don't have access to, from Charles Ramsey. And I figured maybe we'll just play that first before we get too serious. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Let's see what happens.
I get you. Let's do it.
Yeah. Hey, how you like it so far? Good?
Silence is golden, as they say, Andy.
Here we go.
This is something that most of the witnesses, if not all of them, probably didn't see.
Yes. Thank you, Charles. Thank you. Thank you, Charles Ramsey. Moving right along. For some reason, that just strikes me as I don't get it. I don't know. That strikes me as being pretty. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That just strikes me as being a little funny. I don't know why. Anyway.
You're not the only one. Oh my goodness. Yes. So maybe you were saying sweet up.
We'll have to come back to that again. Anyway.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock.
Come on now. Calm yourself.
Stop it. Anyway.
He likes to get him where he can.
Yeah. And we do know this for a fact. As in last show, we determined this.
There is no such thing as a G-spot.
We know that too.
Oh.
Just want to get that. Want to get that out of the way.
Yeah.
No, actually. So now, what was I talking about? Oh yeah. We're talking about. No, actually, we're going to dive into some. We don't report the news. We talk about, as we've said so many times, we kind of just provide some, sometimes lighthearted commentary on what's going on in the news and different perspectives and different audio clips that we've managed to capture to give our listeners around the world an idea of what's going on in different areas of the world and what the headlines are, and kind of we dive into those headlines and discuss them and hash them out and invite your calls as well if you care to share your opinions, thoughts, ideas, concerns And our number to do that is 515-605-9888. And we welcome you on board our show at any time you care to join us when we're live, of course. Of course, those of you who are listening on this podcast will not be able to do so, but we want to remind you that you are welcome to join the program when we are live, which is Monday mornings. I'll give you the Eastern times, okay, wherever you are in the world. Eastern times, Monday morning, we're on at noon and at 7 p.m. in the UK. And on Wednesday and Friday, we're on at 3. Did I get that right? Noon and...
Yeah, you got it wrong, sweetheart. It's 5 p.m. in the UK, which is 9 a.m. for you, I think, in your neck of the woods. Yeah. And then
that's on Monday. That's on Monday.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
9 a.m. for me, noon in the Eastern time zone, at 7 p.m. in the UK.
5 p.m.
Right. Should I do it again? All right. Our times are... Our times are... Okay, are we listening? Okay. Shall we attempt to get it right this time?
Go for it, sweetheart.
Okay, I'm going to go for it. I'm looking at it. Okay, Monday. No, our show times are again. Let me go back. Take it back a couple steps. Right. Our call-in number to join our show live, for those of you who would like to do it, and we do welcome you on board, is 515-605-9888. On Mondays, we are at 9 a.m. Pacific time, noon on the East Coast, and at 5 p.m. in UK. Wednesdays and Fridays, we are noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. On the East Coast, and now I got it right, 7 p.m. in the UK.
8 p.m. Back to 8 p.m., sweetie.
All right, let me do it again. Our number again is 515-605. All right, so when did that happen? Okay, we jumped time zones or daylight saving zones or whatever you call it. When did that happen?
Yeah, we've literally just, I think it was Sunday, we jumped forward to an hour again, like caught up with you guys, finally.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, guys, everyone listening, we've gone from 7 p.m. back to 8 p.m. in the UK.
No respect to it, because for a while I didn't know that you didn't change. Or I was saying the times were as though they were before daylight saving times, and you would correct me and say, no, we're still an hour. We haven't jumped yet in daylight saving times. And Amanda spent a lot of time correcting me on that. And now that I've given what she corrected me on, now it's back to something else. And you know what? Who is on first? Anyway, what?
Yeah, right.
If you will just lean back and relax.
I'm trying. All right, let me do that. All right.
It's all good, Andy. Don't worry about it. Don't sweat it.
Do you remember what I was going to talk about before I got into this time zone thing? Anyway, oh yeah, I was going to invite everybody aboard. I mean that, and so does Amanda. Amanda and I have talked about it. We want to encourage callers to get on the show. We might even start promoting the show a little more than we have to encourage more live callers to take part in the show and be our guest to do so. So some of the news items we're going to talk about, and these are kind of just various headline items, are, as we said earlier on, is the trial of Derek Chauvin. And how we're going to begin again is I'm going to play a clip from the hearing, and this is an 8-year-old who was sent to the store. This happened outside a grocery store, right? Was sent to the store by her parents to bring back some snacks. And for you parents out there, can you imagine sending your kid to the store, bring back, around the corner, get some snacks, and bring them home. They do it all the time. And they happen to witness a murder this time, a police officer killing somebody. We're going to hear an 8-year-old's testimony, and then it'd be immediately followed by her teen cousin, back to back. Let's take a listen. This is from the Derek Chauvin murder trial.
I was sad and kind of mad.
And tell us, why were you sad and mad?
Because it felt like he was stopping his breathing, and it's kind of like hurting him.
It's been nights. I stayed up apologizing and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more.
And witnesses there, and also there was a fire department EMT who went over to one of the cops who was kind of protecting Derek Chauvin and making sure no citizens got close to the scene, what was going on. And EMT said, I need to step in there and provide medical relief. And the officer, who's also indicted, by the way, and his trial will be forthcoming, and he's obviously been fired and was jailed and out on bail, and will undoubtedly probably go back to jail for a great portion of his life. I would assume so. Of course, you're innocent till proven guilty, but we're able to express our opinion. Of course, my opinion is he's going to go to jail for a very long time, as will Derek Chauvin. But anyway, this officer said to the EMT who wanted to provide some emergency assistance to Floyd, was told by this officer that I advise you to stay away from this, and hey, you're part of the fire department. You know the deal. You know the deal here. Come on, back off.
Yeah.
And this is we're going to hear now from Charles Ramsey, again providing commentary on the witnesses, what they did not see.
Yeah. Okay.
Or maybe what they did see. Here we go.
And you have video to back it up that actually shows the actions of the crowd. You can hear the audio. Some of the names that were called, believe me, I've heard a whole lot worse than that over the course of my career. And I've seen hostile crowds, real hostile crowds. And that would not qualify to be considered hostile, in my opinion. As far as distraction goes, you have to learn to stay focused on the job at hand. He had nothing more important than the safety of the person he was trying to take into custody, period. Nothing else was more important than that. He failed in that responsibility. And I think what the defense is doing is just simply throwing as much stuff out as possible to try to make a weak excuse, but there is no excuse for what Derek Chauvin did.
And talking about the show, as we expressed on a Monday show, it was the George Floyd murder that inspired the conversation that led to us getting on the air, on the radio, and on this internet radio show, and expressing various, we all agree, we're all pretty much on the same page as to what we all witnessed on TV, which was shown around the world. We saw what we saw. We can't deny that. But it was that episode in the news that got us talking about that and other items in the news, and the election and Donald Trump at the time, of course, which was the impetus for us getting on and doing this show, which is about a year ago. We're going to hear some more from Charles Ramsey, and the reason why, he was the former chief of police of two major cities, Philadelphia and Washington, and now we're going to hear what he has to say about something to do with how these officers are actually trained and what the appropriate conduct should have been. Once they had him detained, he was no longer fighting back. His legs weren't flailing, as you'll hear him say. He was down on the ground, and okay, we got him. That's okay. Ease up now. Let's get things under control. Get him up, and their responsibility is actually his safety. Actually, when they detain somebody and cuff somebody, the officers are responsible for that person's safety. Let's take a listen.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was in the initial encounter when they were bringing the George Floyd to the car, and he didn't get in the car, and they were trying to pull him into the car. That's force, okay? But when you look at these cases, you have to look from the beginning of the contact all the way up to the end. And just because force was justified at one point doesn't make it justified at a later point in the encounter. Once they got him in a prone position, which by itself, your training will tell you, you don't keep a person in that position very long. Mm-hmm. And once they got him totally under control, he was handcuffed, his legs weren't flailing or anything like that, the force has to stop, period. That's it. There was no reason to continue with the kind of force and pressure they were putting on him, whether it was his neck or back, after he was no longer resisting. I mean, that's the training.
And there's some that go out and say, well, if you saw the whole video, which was released months after the original video of Floyd's murder, showing a longer version of from beginning to end, and they show how they tried to get George Floyd into the car, and he somewhat resisted, and they had to get him down to the ground. And we all saw that too. That does not change a damn thing. It changes nothing. Yeah. This guy not only had his knee deep on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 49 seconds, was actually changed recently, as it's hearing, to well over 9 minutes actually, and that's a fact. There's no reason for it. A knee on the neck, suffocating him, killing him. You know, so under some, the officer, you don't know the history. The guy was on drugs. Nothing. Bullshit. You know,
was there proof that he was on drugs at the time?
They found that he was on some, and not anything that would have created, you know, George Floyd was not being violent. He may have resisted a little bit, blah, blah, blah. He was not punching, he was not kicking, he didn't have any weapons on him, he had nothing. And we all saw the video. I'm not just saying this is my opinion. What we saw.
Yeah,
what we saw.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Well, I still think it's disgusting, and justice definitely needs to be brought forward for this because, oh my goodness, where does it stop? I mean, in my opinion, it's bang out of order to do that to him. And you heard it from the horse's mouth just now that once you stop resisting, you know? But what was in that guy's mind just to keep his knee there for that long? I mean, it's almost like a fearful act. Like, I have no control over this guy, therefore I must have my knee on his neck for 9 minutes.
I just can't. And the officer seemed more, when you see the video, he is not looking down at George Floyd. You see him kind of looking straight ahead, looking at the people who are around. And we all heard, just like we just heard on this audio clip, we all heard the actual audio of people all around saying, get off his neck, you're killing him, you're harming him, you're killing him, get off his neck. Well, you know, again, 515-605-988 if you care to join the show. What would you have done if you were there? What would you have done? Yeah. You know?
Yeah. And to hear that witness say that she spent time apologizing, that is awful. Yeah. What a place to be stuck in, that guilt, the feeling that you could have done more. But could she have done more? You know, if she'd gone over and said, you know, stop this and tried to pull him off him, she would have been arrested herself.
Even if she went over there, let's say, I'm just imagining if I were there. I don't know, it's easy, you know, in hindsight to say, well, here's what I would have done, but none of us know what we would have done. And there were people around there, we saw what they did, right?
Yeah.
And let me just inject one other thing real quick, because there was another hate crime committed in New York City when a guy beat severely, which is on videotape, an elderly Asian woman with witnesses standing around it. Nobody did anything about it at all. Nobody. Anyway, so that just happened a couple of days ago, and there's video of that as well. But anyway, I just want to. The point being here is we don't know what we would have done standing there. You know what? Yeah. Those witnesses didn't help that woman at all. The Asian woman who was beat because she allegedly beat because she was Asian.
People tend to freeze up in all sorts of situations.
They do. Yeah. They do. But I don't know. I mean, let's play. You know, okay. Here's a scenario. Okay, it's happening. You'll go over there and you tell that police officer, and I have his name somewhere, but not right in front of me. So, but because there's a couple of cops standing around while this thing's happening, protecting Derek Chauvin's actions, and the two cops that were assisting him, making sure nobody got too close to provide assistance. Don't do that. Don't help a dying man. Anyway, if you walked up to him and said, "Sir, you are killing him. I want you to get off his neck right now, because you're going to be in an orange jumpsuit. You're going to be arrested, put in jail, and probably spend the bulk of your life in jail if you don't get off his neck right now."
Yeah.
And you attempted to do so. Are they going to arrest you? And if they arrested you, if they handcuffed you, and you said, "You know what? You're going to end up in jail, not me. Go ahead, handcuff me."
Yeah, it's a valid point. That's one way to do it. And I think, you know, in that type of situation where you're so shocked by what you're witnessing, sometimes all those things go out of your head, like we just said about, you know, freezing up and whatever. You always find that in tough situations like that, you think about the things you could have said afterwards or you could have done. And, you know, I've seen some things, and there's been moments where I've just stood there in shock at what I'm seeing. And, you know, it's afterwards you come away from the situation like, oh, I could have done this, I should have said that. And, you know, next time something happens like that, I'll be more prepared. And the thing is, because it's so unexpected, you never are prepared. Because it just happens. But I guess you can be more conscious of it and remember back, okay, so this happened before, how can I approach this differently? And go with that gut feeling, right? That's the best we can do. Yeah.
Hey, Amanda, we're going to take a quick break from a product that we all like and talk about so much on this show. And then we're going to come back with a very special guest who we've invited to come on the show, and he's on standby now. We're going to play this commercial message, folks, and then we're going to come back with our special guest. So we'll be right back after this message.
Dear Mainland, aloha. My brother and I keep hearing about your fear of missing out, FOMO, running this way and that to try and do every little thing. Maybe you don't worry about FOMO. Instead, maybe you try a little slow-mo with a cold cone of beer. Brother, you get FOMO. No more. One life, right? Don't blow it. Mahalo.
Okay. Hey, we're back. We're back with our special guest, Bob Kimmel from New York, live on the Andy Banda Show.
Yes, sir. Glad to be here.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, thank you, for an elderly guy.
Oh, sweetheart. I'm glad to hear it, darling. Thank you for being with us.
Well, pleased to be with you.
I will say that Bob Kimmel, who is my uncle, has known me my entire life. Mm-hmm. Uh-oh, we're in trouble now.
Thing, right?
we're in trouble now, and I think on the previous show, Bob, I was saying I remember vividly when you used to come visit us, and I was knee height, and we used to tackle you when you walked in the front door.
That's exactly what I recall. Oh yes, you did. You guys did a pretty good job tackling me too.
Is it straight for the legs, wasn't it? Is that what you said before?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
no bruises though, right? There weren't any bruises. But so as we were saying earlier, and because it's an internet radio show, and we don't know what we're doing. We have on the show with us now the former director of CBS Radio News New York. And I also remember as a youngster going to Rockefeller Center and you taking us around and showing us the newsroom and how NBC.
NBC. See?
Well, I worked for a CBS station as well, and I worked for an ABC station, and I worked for an NBC. But at NBC, I was network radio news director. Yes.
There we go. So I wasn't totally off.
I know it can get confusing when you start counting up all the alphabet. Letters
and all the C's, the NBC, the ABC, all the C's.
Yeah, but not BBC. But,
not not BBC. So we were talking about, as news director, can you take us through, a time period? You go to work, you get the news from the field, you organize it, see what you want to cover, what you don't, you assign it, how much time you're going to spend on each item. Can you talk to us somewhat about how that is all done?
Well, it depends on where you are, what you're doing, what station, whether it's local, whether it's network or whatever. If it's local, basically, you're depending upon a couple things. If you're a major station, a bigger station in a market, or even some of the smaller markets, you've got you'll have AP, Associated Press, wire service coming in, and in the old days there was more than AP, UPI, and so forth and so on. Mm-hmm. And you would, if you were doing a 5-minute newscast on the hour on the station, and you were doing both network, or rather world news, and local news, you would depend on the AP wire basically for your news coming from around the world. And depending, again, upon if you were doing a 5-minute newscast and it was including local news, you would start off with either your local news or the network or the world news, national news, I should say. National news would generally, unless it were a major event around the world, I would say national news would get the priority, or local news if there was a big news break and you do the whole story. On the other hand, if you were a network news person in New York with ABC or NBC or whatever, you would be taking your wire service copy from around the world, news from around the world. When I was there, it was AP and UPI, and you would decide what your lead would be. Maybe that would go 20 seconds or so, depending upon how major the story was. And you'd write about that, and then you'd write about either, to say, world news or national news, depending on what was the big story, would be your lead. And you'd go through the rest of the material you had, and you would be reporting national and international news. Again, if you were a news person on a local station and you were doing a 5-minute newscast on the hour, let's say, you would be doing mostly local news. With possibly some major stories from around the world or national stories as well. Again, depends. Now, what has evolved, of course, in the 60s were all news stations, and that was an entirely different situation, for instance, as an example, at WINS All News in New York, where I was assistant news director for a while, back in the, late 60s or so. We would have 20-minute segments, and we'd round up all the national and international news. And, of course, if something broke, like if you had a terrible mass shooting somewhere in the States, that would, could be your lead story. But then you would have a 20-minute, and as you would have in local situations and in network, of course, you would have, if you were a reasonably larger local station, reporters out, and they would be coming in with reports lasting maybe 50 seconds, maybe up to a minute, maybe less, and so forth, reporting from the scene, and that would be integrated into your newscast, as it is on an all-news station as well. And again, the reporting in the all-news station could evolve in a 20-minute segment, followed by another 20-minute segment of reporting, and there'd be a lot of repeated information, rewritten in a different way, of course, because you'd have a different anchor doing it, and so on. So that is basically the situation. And then, of course, in the older days, you had commentators that would be on the network, and they were not necessarily within a newscast, but they could be as well. You had Walter Winchell. I don't know how many of the folks
I remember the name.
Recall Walter Winchell, but good evening, Mr. and Mrs. North and South America, and coast to coast and border to border, and all the ships at sea. Let's go to press. That was Walter Winchell, and he would make comments as well. He intermixed his news with commentary, and it wasn't truly a newscast per se, and you had other people doing that sort of thing. And of course, that has changed to a Walter Winchell, probably, if I had to weigh the facts in terms of his orientation politically, he may have been a little bit more on the liberal side than he was, but he was generally factual. But he commented. He made comments about things and such. And you had other people doing that, but you didn't have it to the extent, I believe, that you had it today in, say, Rush Limbaugh, who is no longer with us, but who was, as with Fox Network, pretty far to the right in reporting and so forth, the news, which has led to some extent today, and not only because of the sources of news, but the remarks made about news by people such as those who are in the presidential seat in regard to, quote, fake news or such, when it wasn't fake news at all. The news, and today you have a situation where you have news networks, and they are not on the broadcast on the air, so to speak. They're cable, but we can go into the fairness doctrine in
I'd like to discuss that.
The Fox News, we know where it stands politically, off to the right, coming up with stories that basically attract a certain audience and have actually, I think, influenced the political picture in the country by their news and by their broadcasts. And you have MSNBC, which gravitates a little bit toward the left. So, but in the old days, you had ABC, CBS, NBC, and we were pretty much straight down the middle. They're, straight reporting. And I would say that even though a lot of people feel it's not the case, I think CNN is relatively in the middle. Certainly not extended politically as Fox News is far right. As I said, MSNBC, cable, is off to the left of it. So you have this orientation now, which has led to mistrust to some extent. I think that there's some of the polls that have been taken recently and in the recent past, or even going back 5, 6, 7 years, have shown a certain distrust by the public in news today, which is too bad. It's unfortunate, and it's caused by any number of reasons. But the attachment to the political picture, I think, in terms of one network going one way and the other way, and so forth, and some of the leaders we've had debasing news, in a sense, have led to this mistrust, which is unfortunate.
What you were saying before regarding first of all, the fairness doctrine, and also right wing, left wing. You take, for example, we covered a lot on this show during the presidential campaigns was all the promoting. Perpetuation of a story that months prior to the election, months way out, where you have the president of the United States, when he looked at the numbers and saw he wasn't faring out so well, coming up with a story. The only way I'm going to lose this thing is if the election is stolen, and begins to promote this whole without any basis, because the election didn't happen yet. This is way in advance. This is
of course,
and then you have the media, the news reporting agencies, like we were saying, Fox and Newsmax and others, picking up on this and further laying it out there as though this is something that's going to happen. And then we all know the result of that and what had happened subsequently. We all know how that progressed. But that's news media. And then we heard even way before years. When Trump just took office and just shortly thereafter, the media is the enemy of the people. I remember that, the enemy of the people, and fake news and all these things. And it just is, when you're like what you're saying before, just a few minutes ago, about the evolution of where we were from the 60s and the 70s and straightforward news reporting, and then we came to the fairness doctrine. Can we talk about that just for a minute and how that?
The fairness. It's interesting to make this point, though. However, with the fairness doctrine applied to broadcast news, that was news set out over the air, whether it was the network or on a station or whatever. It would not have applied to Fox News or MSNBC or any of the cable networks. The fairness doctrine came into play in the late 40s, early 50s. And the whole idea then was to maintain a certain balance coming out of broadcasting. Basically, you took the idea was to get broadcast stations, networks, whatever, to get into the more controversial situations and so on. But if you had a major point regarding some subject and that you gave one side of the picture, you were obligated under the fairness doctrine to provide the other side as well by a spokesman who represented that position. So that was the fairness doctrine. And as I said, it did not apply to cable. And so Fox wouldn't have been involved. Now, you do have another situation which still exists, and it's called equal time. And it applies to candidates running for office, federal office and such, including the president and so forth. If you give one side of the picture of a political candidate speaking and so forth, you presumably are supposed to provide time to the candidate running against that person as well. So that exists yet today. Fairness doctrine disappeared during the Reagan administration.
Right.
They knocked it off. The Republican position basically was, and also the radio networks and the news operations were opposed to it as well. I frankly favored it. I felt it was really a fair way of presenting the news. In other words, giving both sides of the story. However, during the Reagan administration, it was eliminated, and actually it existed on the books to some extent till about 2011, when it was officially written off the rule books, but it was ignored from the Reagan period on, and so you didn't have an obligation to the fairness doctrine, but it would not have applied to the non-on-air operations, such as the cable networks.
Okay.
My goodness. Let me ask you a question. When you were gathering the news as a director of a radio news network, were you conscious? Is this something you had to orchestrate into your own presentation of what you were saying?
Well, what our newscasters were saying, yes, we had to abide by the fairness doctrine, and if we had a special program on of any kind, talk program of some kind with guests and so forth, that was always part of the consideration, part of the picture, and such. Absolutely, yeah. Well, as I said, I found it was appropriate.
It's really, especially I think it's been further and more so exemplified during this whole previous administration and the election campaigning and all the claims of fraud and that goes on.
Yeah. Well, again, it wouldn't have applied to cable news according to the way it was written. They may have, of course, if there had been a major effort on the part of some political group or party or whatever to have it reinstated and apply to cable, then it likely would have made a difference, but it hasn't. And I see this whole business of news sources being considered one side or the other unfortunate, and that the people who want to believe in one way or another will listen to one network so they can reinforce their feelings and attitudes and views, and the people who are likely not to feel, the way that network's political position is, won't listen to it. But it's segmenting the audience in a sense. And again, I just wish that wouldn't have happened. You always have some segmentation, but at one time Walter Cronkite was considered one of the most trusted men in America. CBS, and and he was delivering news straightforward, no question, and he was trusted.
Yes. And who can forget? And that's the way it is on whatever date how he closed.
Exactly. Precisely. You got a very good memory.
I remember it vividly for whatever. Yeah.
You got a better memory than I have. You see, when you get older.
I was saying we were talking, previously on the phone, and I remember also vividly when you covered the Apollo space program.
Space shots.
Yes, and you were at the Kennedy or Cape Canaveral, or Kennedy, what was called then, and you were there during the launch.
Yeah, I wasn't actually covering. I was managing the radio network news coverage. I hadn't actually been a reporter. Oh gosh, since the what will I say? Earlier 60s.
Right.
Not since the earlier 60s.
Yeah.
I can see it running through the family with these voices. Uh-oh.
But I remember these all the press packages. You used to send these flats, NBC
that was remarkable to be within the I would say that we were maybe as much as somewhere between a quarter and a half a mile away from the actual shots, but still we were relatively close, and it was quite that noise and the shock wave that came through when those satellites were shot, when those things were shot up in the air. That was really incredible.
That would have been amazing. What do you find looking back, and I know you've done quite a few things also subsequent to your career in radio news, which I want to get to, but looking back at your your tenure in the radio news industry, what stands out as something significant as a memory as well?
Oh, yes. Well, I can certainly go back to when I was with the American Forces Network. Mm-hmm. When I got into the service, I was very lucky. I got a broadcast, identification in terms of where I had been, what I had done in the past. Before I had done some radio, and I've been with the newspaper briefly when I was drafted. And having indicated that, they decided that I could be a news person in the military. And I was with American Forces Network and sent to Germany. Wow. And I worked in Germany as doing sports and news. And then I was sent to, I civilianized, became a civilian, and went to Paris for a year and reported the news from Paris. And one of the more significant things, I think, what I witnessed was President de Gaulle in the Élysée Palace giving the medal, I think it was the Medal of Liberation, to Winston Churchill.
Mm. Whoa.
And that goes back to about, 1958, I would say. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Winston Churchill, so on and so forth. And
that's incredible.
I remember not being far from speaking of Paris, another thing that I recall was standing on a stand near the Élysée, not the Élysée Palace, oh my God, it's these things when you do get old.
I have that problem all the time. I wouldn't worry about it, sweetheart.
Anyway, watching de Gaulle and the German president coming down the Élysée, the main road.
Yeah. Champs-Élysées. I know what you're talking about.
Champs-Élysées.
Yes.
And going, and I was recording this on a tape recorder, because in those days you didn't have cassettes and stuff like that. You had to do everything. If you were recording it before that there was a wire recorder, but that was ancient stuff. We did have tape recorders, and I didn't realize it, but while I was recording it, my tape was flying into the air off the reel. And I heard a bunch of people yelling at me in French and this and that. And I turned around and I saw this whole thing. So I had to, and of course there were military groups accompanying him, men on horseback and so forth, and noise. So I had to redo the report after he had long gone, as though he were right there coming by. But I've had some interesting interviews. Everybody from sticking a microphone in front of Richard Nixon, interviewing Bobby Kennedy a couple times, being thrown out of an affair at the University of Pennsylvania when I put a microphone in front of the Shah of Iran at a reception when I wasn't supposed to, and I got yanked out of there pretty quickly when I was working for a station in Philadelphia. And in Paris, of course, I interviewed a lot of celebrities and everyone ranging, well, not everyone, but people ranging from Edward G. Robinson to David Niven, this one and that one. So that was not news. That was just entertainment stuff and so forth and so on. But I did report on this. I uncovered a letter recently, which was rather interesting, which I didn't even realize I had. It was in French, and it was addressed to me from the FLN, which was the group in Algeria in which the French were fighting at the time in the 50s, in terms of their situation in Algeria. And this was a letter sent to AFN, to me in Paris, presenting all the views of the FLN. That goes back to the late 50s or mid 50s almost. So,
wow.
But there are a lot of other situations that came up. Interviewing Bobby Kennedy on the sands of Long Island along the beach we were walking along with the TV. I was doing a TV interview and interviewing him, and then I heard our crew was walking sort of along the side behind me, yelling at me, and the wire from the microphone had come loose from their camera, and so had to do that one over again too. You know, little mismanagement things here and there. But I did have an interesting career. One of the worst situations that I recall was in Philly when I was working in Philly in terms of the event that took place. When I was working in Philadelphia, a bunch of us had been invited for a lunch at a restaurant that had opened up in South Philadelphia on a free lunch. There must have been about 20 of us there, 15 of us, and somebody up on the balcony yelled down, "The president has been shot."
I was just going to rewind. I was just going to take us back to November 22nd, 63.
Yeah, and somebody yelled up, and somebody said, "Oh, come on, cut it out." They thought he was kidding. He said, No, he was shot in Dallas and so forth. Of course, we were in Philly, but we did run around getting reaction type pieces from people and so on for the shows that followed. But that, of course, was a terrible situation. John Kennedy, I recall coming into the station I worked for in Philadelphia when he was running as a guest on one of our shows at WCAU Philadelphia, which was then WCAU CBS O&O. It's no longer WCAU, evolved into something else now. Yeah. But, there are all kinds of interesting situations that I ran into during my rather long career, which followed. And I'm involved in a local newspaper now, which I helped to found, but unfortunately the pandemic brought a lack of advertising, retail advertising, so we have only a website.
I remember doing that.
I was volunteered. I didn't do it as a commercial thing.
Of course.
Did it as a community thing. Anyway, so but an interesting situation, and certainly radio news gathered its first impetus on the air back during the First World War, and radio had not been around very long then. And it didn't have the news significance, of course, but people were beginning to listen to it for news during that First World War back in 1918, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And then it came along and so on, and then got built up. That's why you had all these commentators and so on, and variety of shows and so forth. And then, of course, Second World War, where it really emerged as an important feature, when you had video as well coming into the picture to some extent and so forth, but not much. But those things sort of brought it up. And today, it's still there, even though you have competition from cable and on-air TV and podcast. You heard of podcasts?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Heard of them.
And social media. The BBC, Amanda, the BBC has made some changes as well, from what I understand. I don't know all of them, but I think they cover a little more political news now than they did in the past, perhaps.
They tend to cover a lot of different areas now than they used to, for sure. Yeah, they've got so many different branches of their stations and reaching out to all different areas. It's amazing how far they've come.
Yeah. Well, anyway, there's certainly and then you have online, you have web news where you can pick up stuff and so on. I don't think that's yet evolved into the situation where it's as penetrating and as still as radio. Incidentally, I recently saw some sort of a poll where radio today, between younger people, they listen to it only in the car. That is radio news and such. And I guess they're absorbed on the web and so forth and so on. And of course, Newspapers are the ones that have suffered the most in terms of media today, based on what's going on with the internet. There've been layoffs of major newspapers, and some of them. Fortunately, many of them, most of them are surviving, but some aren't. And your local newspapers are disappearing from the scene like mad. So that's one area of media that has suffered from the on-site website and online and so on that's going on today.
It's interesting. When we first started this show, we're on the Blog Talk Radio, Internet Radio. It's a radio network, and there's many programs on Blog Talk Radio, of which we are one. And when we first started doing this show, we had no idea that after we were done our live show, which started 15 minutes, then it went to a half hour, then an hour, we've done up to 2-hour shows. And for a while they were integrating music and the whole, doing a real radio program with music, and we decided to focus more on talk and discussion and commentary and bringing guests on, and anybody can hear music through any source they'd like to. They don't need to hear us to get music. So we've cut that down a little bit, but interestingly enough, when we started the show, we had no idea that Blog Talk Radio actually made the radio shows a podcast, and they were picked up by iTunes and Google.
Radio is now going into podcasts.
We didn't even know. We thought we hung up after our live show, and that was the end of it. And then we look at the numbers, and we're seeing these high numbers for days that we weren't even on. And we're like, we didn't do a show on Thursday, and there was a period of time where we were over the summer, I guess almost leading up to election, actually, we did this 5 days a week, and we had all the preparation that went into doing. We produce some comical radio clips along with what we do. We have a lot of fun, outside of commenting on what's going on in the headlines. We do a lot of silly stuff, and we hope is engaging, entertaining, silly stuff anyway. And it could take hours to produce a radio clip that's on the show for just a couple of minutes, and it's just an amazing amount of work. So here's the interesting. We were talking about radio and the evolution and what's going on with it now, which creates a great segue into where you went and how your career evolved after radio. How you kind of stayed in radio but kind of took a different spin on it.
I got involved in a little bit of public relations work, which dealt with broadcast directly in New York with a large firm, an international firm. And what we did was media training, among other things, which taught executives, major executives, and I spoke to groups ranging from, later on when we had our own operation going, but I was with a large PR firm called Hill & Knowlton. And we did media training. We taught people how, everybody from executives to personalities and so forth, how to respond to the press when interviewed, how to respond to questions, and so forth. And also we did what we called satellite. We fed out video news reports and audio news reports, which were really disguised public relations pieces that were done for corporations and so on, and or organizations, and they would involve even, for instance, later on when I was involved in my own businesses for the Postal Service, when we did a piece on Raoul Wallenberg going out as a news piece around about a minute and a half, and that was much later in my career, but I got so involved with Raoul Wallenberg, I decided to do an hour-long TV documentary about him independently, which I did, and so forth. But we did intermittently between that period and the time that I officially retired and did the documentary. We did a lot of this, what we called satellite. We also did satellite media tours, and of course the satellite business changed the news business considerably as well, in that you could feed material going up from out of let's say in the field, a satellite truck, to a satellite and beam it down to a station, and it would be broadcast live or recorded and whatever. So, some of these the technical changes influenced what people saw and heard on the air as well. I remember doing piece with the president of, what was it, 1-800-Flowers or some such thing.
Sure.
On a given holiday, went out up, and what we would do would be to contact individual stations, and each station would say have 10 minutes of interviews, and the interview questions would come in on the phone, and the satellite television, the video image, would go out on the satellite and be broadcast or recorded at the station level for their use. So you had a lot of interesting things come about because of the technical changes that affected not only broadcasting, but in this case, PR and many other things as well.
Yeah.
Sure. Interesting.
Wow,
Very interesting.
Okay.
And you started actually in that field of producing these independent, if you will, radio pieces through your own company, right? And then that
audio TV features. I joined with another fellow that started the audio side and brought in the TV side, and we were doing that. We began to feed our satellite television stuff from the 82nd floor of the Empire State Building, where they had a satellite feed antenna. So it would feed out across the country to the station that would pick it up, the individual pieces, the short news type pieces, were sent out across the country and picked up by many stations. The satellite media tour was an individual thing with a station at a given time. So there was an awful lot of interesting aspects to what changed.
I seem to remember. I think you had about 2,000 stations that you broadcast to at the time.
We would alert as many as those stations. Not every station obviously took everything down that we fed out. That was the audio news release. And the video news release. That's what they were, VNRs and video news releases. And again, as I said, they were, and stations used them. They were short, brief news pieces, which actually were disguised as these news and so on, but they had a little bit of PR in them for the corporation or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. The interesting thing is, at the time, and even now, I think, for the longest time, prior to the internet just overwhelming our modern technology, radio was offered more ubiquity than any other media available, with a percentage of about 99% of the population listening to radio at some day part during the day, whether there's an alarm clock in the morning, in the car, as you said. And here's the interesting thing. Today, numbers indicate that radio is still 94% of the population either streams radio, or they listen to it in the car, or they're on the treadmill at the gym, whatever it might be, or they're streaming a radio station via another podcast.
Actually, the percentage of radio listeners has not decreased as significantly as some of the other aspects of news media has. It's interesting. It seems to have survived, and it likely will. I mean, you can't walk along Broadway or wherever and watch television. You can listen to the radio. You can't drive and watch television and so forth. Of course, God knows what's going to happen if they ever put television into a car, except for a lot of accidents.
Yes.
I don't think that'll happen.
I have it in my car, except it only works in park. I've got a Tesla, and when you're in park, you can watch Netflix and Hulu and all these different channels on your screen there, but not when you're driving.
Yeah, maybe the back seats can watch it.
The interesting thing that people say, you have this business and you have this product or service, you want to disseminate information and get the word out, and you have to have a website. Radio, especially talk radio, not just to promote what we're doing here, but I want to mention that just for a minute, that talk radio offers more engagement than any other kind of radio there is, because people are engaged, they tune in, and a talk radio host will say, coming up, you don't want to miss this, because we're going to have, for example, Bob Kimmel on, the former director of NBC, whatever it might be, or they're having a conversation, and we have to go for a commercial break, but we're going to resume the conversation when we come back with your calls. And people tune into that and they listen, unlike a music-oriented station where you're dialing to the whatever you want to hear, and there's a commercials or a song you don't like, you can switch stations.
Right.
Talk radio, news radio as well. Speaking radio really offers engagement, and I think it will not go away. And when you think about this, they say, well, the website, you got to have a website. Well, there are billions, as a capital B, of dollars being spent by the most major corporations in the world are advertising on radio, and from those companies down to the mom and pop shops. If it didn't work, it wouldn't be happening. Like the newspapers are getting so thin, like you mentioned earlier. And so radio continues to this day to be very, very strong. It doesn't compete with the internet, but it certainly is supportive in a means to get the word out about information, news, commentary, whatever it might be. It's very, very strong to this day.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it holds a lot of comfort for people, for sure, to hear someone's live voice, talking about various things, and especially people that are on their own. They enjoy hearing other people talk about the important things in the world or whatever, and enjoy listening to people having a laugh or whatever it may be. I think people feel a little less lonely in that aspect, and I think that's something that will always be present. So I think radio will still do well, like you guys have just said, for that small reason alone, if not for a million other reasons,
Right. Well, I think that, given all the changes that have taken place in the last century, that radio is still the odds favorite to keep going for a good while.
Yeah.
So forth. And the other media will be around too, but of course. But I think radio's got a good chance of continuing for a good long time.
And of course, the Andy and Amanda show, needless to say, is amongst the top of the.
and then one day they'll be able to transplant a little radio receiver in your brain, and you can turn it on and off anytime you want.
I wouldn't put it on me. But anyway,
they're the day that have those things transmitted into their brains, but don't get to work. And they're listening to the wrong stations. But what did I say? I didn't mean to say that.
So I want to ask you a quick question before we let you go here, and I want to thank you again for joining us and spending the time with us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Andy.
Absolutely.
I want to get it from your.
No, thank you.
From where? Real quick. Amanda and I have never met.
Sorry, Amanda.
Amanda and I, we have never met. We've never, before getting on this show and doing it, we've never spoken to each other. We don't know each other.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting how this whole thing has come together.
Yes,
anyway,
it is. It's incredible, really. And your call, Amanda, you're calling. Is it from London or where are you?
I'm just outside London, a couple of hours away from London in the UK. Yeah, it's.
I'm about 20 miles away from New York City.
Oh wow! Awesome.
maybe 25. Maybe 25.
Okay.
And I'm sitting just outside of Los Angeles, California, and the person who put us together.
There you go. How about that?
And the person who put us together, who we also have never met, his name is Cornell Butler, and he's in Delaware, who sometimes joins us on the show, and he introduced Amanda and put this whole thing together. So it's kind of, the world has become so small. But
next time it'll be somebody from Mars.
Ask Elon Musk. It just might be. So from where you are now, and as a former radio news director, coordinator, and radio news man, what do you see now? I mean, looking at what's going on in the world as one of the most significant things or crises or topics that is happening right now. If you're following, much of it these days.
You're talking about in the news what's going on around the world?
Yeah, in the news. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good question, because I think what's happening, there are a lot of things going on all over the world that are changing you have all of these insurrections and going in the African continent now going on in terms of you have Afghanistan, you have things going on, and you have things going on in Hong Kong, and you have things going on in other parts of Asia. And you have political situations here in the States that are still, indicating something of a fractured nation in terms of the place, and I'm assuming that all of these things will heal, I certainly hope, and return to normal situations politically. And then you have the pandemic. So, it's... In the States alone, you have Biden trying to pursue a number of paths, economic paths, assistance to various segments of the public, and so on. And, all of these things have been, to some extent, have taken place in the past and are ongoing, but they're all significant. And I would say that at the moment, perhaps the pandemic is playing out as one of the major factors in situations that are taking place in terms of getting news coverage and such. And then political situations still in the States taking place. Two different parties that are going in diametrically different directions. And you still have a lot of fuss going on in Eastern Europe, what's going on, and what the Soviet Union is trying to accomplish. And China is trying to maintain an economic grasp around the world as well. So you have a lot of things going on now that could have major consequences for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, you wake up every day and it's amazing what's going on. And also, I think we're talking about radio and reporting in the news. I mean, it's we have such incredible capability now of grabbing news when it happens and getting it out there as it happens.
Oh well, just look at the incidents that happened. For instance, and this is not a major event, but it's a terrible thing to have witnessed, and that is this Asian woman who was knocked down. While walking along the street in, what was the city? Slips my mind suddenly.
In New York, right there? Yeah.
New York, of course, New York.
Yeah.
And the people looking out of the door, it was captured, and they did nothing about it. And, that's just so sad. It's so sickening to watch that it happened to begin with, and nobody ran out to assist her and so forth.
Yeah.
But you couldn't have seen that kind of situation before all of this modern technology was brought into play.
It really is.
So it's having an effect. It's having an effect. Look at the businesses going on with Floyd.
Yes, and we just were talking about that part. Yeah.
So that's brought a lot of changes to the news business as well.
We have somebody on the line here who wants to ask you a question. If anybody wants to join us, we're 515-605-9888 to get on the Andy and Amanda show. And Bob, we have a question for you. And go ahead, caller, with your question.
You ever served in an infantry unit, son?
Did I ever serve in an infantry unit? No, I went through. I must say that my brother served in the 10th Armored Division during the Second World War, Andy's father, as a matter of fact. Yes. And but I did not serve in. He was in. Your dad was in the Battle of the Bulge, as a matter of fact, Andy.
Yes, he was.
And 10th Armored Division. I was very fortunate. I was very lucky. I was sent to Europe, and I was. After basic training, I did some broadcasting at the local Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then I went on the air in Germany. So I must say I was very lucky.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, our guest,
all these things.
Yeah, it's a great conversation, and it's wonderful to have you on board with us here today. And our guest has been
really
Bob Kimmel. We're talking about radio news and his career and at NBC and in Philadelphia at CBS and public relations, and what a fascinating discussion and conversation it has been. And hey, I want to thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Believe me, I enjoyed it. It gave me a chance to get a lot of things off my chest. And well, listen, it's nice to have all these people listen to a little bit of bravado. When you can't speak to a lot of people socially because of the pandemic. So I enjoyed it, and you and Amanda do a great job, and I appreciate being on.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate it, and we're in 16 countries are listening to our broadcast right now and following.
Wow.
16 countries around the world. If you look at the map, we're everywhere. There's not a continent where we don't exist. We don't follow it. It's pretty. It's interesting how that evolved. But yeah, so whatever we're doing.
I wonder why that fella asked me if I've ever been in the infantry. I did call under barbed wire in basic training with 30 caliber machine gun fire overhead, but that was the closest I ever got to anything resembling actual warfare. Wow. Fortunately,
he was very influential in my career. And folks who follow the show know that my real job is a performing blues and folk musician, singer-songwriter, and I've done that quite a bit.
Yeah.
And somebody who was incredibly helpful in my career early on, out of the gate, who remained in my corner as a fan and promoted my music for a good bit since we were introduced, was a guy by the name of known in Philadelphia radio as Gene Shea.
Oh, well, Gene, of course. I went through. He was in college with I think same time I was, and he certainly was renowned for his country music aspect of his career when he had a country music show and was given all sorts of awards and this and that in Philadelphia.
Yeah, he was, and I think one of the, I remember when I was first on his show, I felt like after you were on his show, he's so popular in the folk music community in Philadelphia that once he had me on as a guest, I figured that's it, I'm done, I can quit now, and that's as high as you can go.
Yeah.
And the bar always gets higher. But
I actually have here. My wife thinks I'm a little nuts for having it around still. Is a bobblehead of Gene Shea.
Right. I have one too.
Up and down,
Yeah.
Bobbleheads is cool.
Among my many collections.
Yes, he was. But I remember when I mentioned to him that I was your nephew. That I think that may have had a lot to do with him always having me on his show. I was on a lot of times. But anyway, he
followed me on a station in Philly when I was working weekends. Still going to college, I think it was. WRT. No, I forgot the call letters. How about that? WHAT.
Yes, sure, I remember. Yeah, of course. And we had another individual, a guy named Michael Tierson, who was a pioneer in FM radio rock and roll. Before you had the WIBG and the Reverb and the fast talking DJs, and they were playing all the music of the '60s and the Dick Clark show and all that. And then the conversation was better like that, and then it went, hi, WMMR, it's cool outside. We're going to have music of the Grateful Dead. And, FM radio just kind of changed how it presented rock and roll music. And we had a guy also from the, I think, 60s, he was saying, named Michael Tierson, who started his career in Philadelphia as well. And but it's great getting these perspectives from various experts and professionals and people who've had these outstanding careers in radio and in broadcast media as part of our show, because we are, even though we're on the internet, this is an internet radio show, it is considered, I guess, to an extent, a form of broadcast media. And
it's your podcast, from what I've heard and seen. I haven't seen, but I've heard, has been great. And you do a great job, Andy and Amanda. You're fantastic, and I think that you guys have got a career in podcasting.
Thank you so much. Like uncle, like nephew, however it goes,
And I will leave you alone now because I think you've had enough of me for the day.
I want to. Again, yes, we've been. But thank you again for joining us. We'll be in touch for sure. Look forward to doing it again down the road, and all the very best. And thanks again for joining.
Well, thank you so much. Today. Take care now.
Thank
you, darling. Bye-bye. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
That was Bob Kimmel, and what a wonderful conversation.
Oh, that was amazing. I loved hearing everything you had to say. Oh.
Yeah, wouldn't it? Yes.
I love your family, Andy.
Oh, thank you so much. Wait till my mother gets on. Anyway. I want to get your mother on this show, by the way. I want to get, we're moving along. We are moving
We are executing on our plan.
Yes, we are. We're getting there. Yeah, that was a great conversation, and what a trip down the yellow brick road of history and radio news and getting the word out and disseminating information both from the corporate sector and public relations and from news. It's
incredible to hear everything you had to say. It really was. Yep. I get so caught up in these conversations. I've always loved people telling stories, and whenever we get a guest on and I'm hearing people talk, it's like I'm sat there in front of them like a little child, legs crossed, sat there in amazement, just listening to everything they have to say, like, oh, wow, yeah. And I often have to stop myself and think, okay, no, take yourself away from that child's state. Start talking.
And
just take it in.
Yeah, you do, and and we have some great. I know I saw the guest list. Some people who I won't go into right now, but we have some folks coming on the show the next couple of weeks. Folks, you don't want to miss an episode of the Andy and Amanda Show. Seriously, we have some just phenomenal guests who work with some names that just I'm not going to mention it now, but some major pop music stars. In the production aspect of their music, and we have some folks who produce major and are producing right now motion pictures and TV shows, and we're going to be visited again as soon as I select a day here works out. We've had Mark Lester on the show previously, and he's going to come back on again. He's looking forward to doing that, and we're going to have him back on. That name I can mention again. But it's been what a ride this has been, and our lineup as we look ahead. Is pretty impressive for this little thing that you and I have here. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's really.
I feel very honored.
And it's a pleasure. It's so great to have met you over the course of the show as well. And
I know, right? Same here, darling.
One could not have a better partner. Such a and a great, such a terrific human being as a partner. It's just really.
I agree.
Really
I agree with you. I love working with you, Andy. It's great. It really is.
Likewise. I want to get into a couple of things before we go, and I know we're starting to run down on time. We'll pick the conversation up on Friday, maybe even tomorrow. We'll see. But matter of fact, tomorrow, real quick. I think I told you earlier, either on the phone or on the show, that I'm going to be doing American Idol tomorrow, not on the show. I'm not. Hey, you never know. But I had to go down to CBS television yesterday, Television City in Hollywood, and I got paid to do a COVID test, and I'm getting paid a very good sum, also to take part in the production aspects of the American Idol show, and that's what I'm doing tomorrow. So that's going to occupy my I think 3:30 Pacific time to 7:30 or something like that. I'll be tied up with that show, which is kind of cool. And I was down at CBS yesterday, and they're already talking about using me further down the road in a production capacity, not as in talent. But that's pretty cool. Wow, look forward to it.
That's amazing. That is so cool.
Yeah. So, and what got me to that was I was thinking maybe we should pick it up and do a show tomorrow, but I won't be able to. But we'll pick this conversation up on Friday because I know we're running out of time. Do you have any news for us there regarding COVID specifically in Europe or the UK? Do you have anything you can dive into real quick?
Only the fact that, we're trying to be very careful because of these lifting of social restrictions and people meeting up outdoors has gone crazy. I was out yesterday and the amount of people I saw gathering in groups so close to each other was ridiculous, and they had no masks on, and I was astounded, Andy, and I was going to walk through the area where all these people were, and I thought, you know what, I'm not going to risk it. It's just a silly thing to do. And people have been leaving litter everywhere because of these restrictions being lifted. And, the cleanup has been ridiculous too. It's disgraceful. In terms of COVID in other countries, sure, there's a lot going on that I could cover. But I think it's going to take a little while to cover that, sweetheart. I'll dive into that more in the next show. But I hear China's had another outbreak in the southwest. With 9 people testing positive, so they've literally got 317 close contacts that have been placed in quarantine, and people being told to stay at home. Businesses closing, even a bridge from China to Myanmar has been closed. And so they're pretty much all over it like a rash, which is impressive. And Yemen, they got their first lot of vaccines. And they're experiencing a second wave, and they're only just getting their first lot of vaccines. So bless them. It's great for them to be vaccinated, and there's not much else for the UK other than Wales. Their pubs and restaurants should be opening up on the 26th of April, if that goes well with the statistics, and so there'll be a bit more socialising for them. And I believe I heard that the US are trying to test more on children. Yeah, to
Yes.
give them vaccines at an early age. Is that right? I think they're hoping
that
to
is
from like
correct.
6 months onwards eventually. Yeah.
Here in California, as of April 16th, every citizen 16 years and older will be eligible to get a vaccine, the entire population of the state of California. And Joe Biden, who originally said 100 million within his first 100 days of office, is now upped it to 200 million vaccines in his first 100 days of office. He's going to hit that. This guy, you look at some of the Facebook posts, and there are people who Trump fans to this day think that Sleepy Joe and he's no good, and fuel prices are going up, and all these things that we've talked about, and then some. It's so horrible, and everything he's done for this country is so horrible. Look at what this guy's accomplished in just a couple of months, a little over a couple of months in office. I mean, it's just been amazing. We're going to talk more about that, folks. I also want to dive into, which we can't do now, I want to dive into the Georgia prosecutors leading a criminal probe into the former president's speaking regarding wanting to get 11,780 more votes. And we're going to dive into that. I've got a whole presentation I'd like to go into regarding that, which obviously we don't have time to start and stop now. So that being said, this has been a pleasure. What a great afternoon or evening or morning it's been, depending where you are.
Absolutely.
Having Bob Kimmel on our show, which I did disclose is a relative of mine, but nonetheless, what a fascinating career and what fascinating stories he's shared with us on the show. And we look forward to catching everybody on our free-flowing Freaky Friday show, broadcast at the same time. This one is on Friday. That being said, we'll say goodbye to everybody. Amanda, take us home. You do it so well.
Oh, thank you, darling. So on behalf of Andy Kimball in California, Hollywood, on behalf of myself in the UK, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Bob, for joining us again. It was a pleasure, and we hope you join us on Friday for some wonderful guests, and it's going to be fun times. So tune in.
Sure will.
It's going to be great.
You
take care.
All right, Amanda. Have a great afternoon, Amanda. We'll be talking to you. Take care, folks.
Thank you,
Bye-bye
sweetheart. Bye.